Imagine a city so ancient that when Julius Caesar arrived here, he was already visiting ancient history. The pyramids Caesar stood before had been standing for 2,500 years before he was even born. To Caesar they were as old as Roman ruins are to us today. On that same ground, 25 million people are living right now, driving to work, dropping their kids off at school. In the shadow of the pyramids. This is Cairo, the largest city in Africa, the largest in the Arab world, one of the 10 most populated cities on earth, conquered 12 times, destroyed 6 times, struck by plague and war more than almost any city in history, and it is still here. How does a city survive 5,000 years of everything history can throw at it? Stay with us, because the answer will change the way you think about civilization itself. When Julius Caesar visited Egypt, the pyramids were already 2,500 years old. To Caesar they were ancient ruins, just as Roman ruins are to us today. That is how old Cairo's story truly is. Every great civilization needed one thing to survive: water. In northeastern Africa, in the middle of the world's largest desert, the Nile delivered water in a way that seemed almost supernatural. Every year, the river flooded and retreated, leaving behind rich black soil so fertile it had no equal in the ancient world. The Egyptians called the fertile floodplain Kemet, the Black Land. They called the desert Deshret, the Red Land. Life existed only in the black. Death waited in the red. Around 3100 BC, Narmer unified Upper and Lower Egypt into the world's first nation-state. He established his capital at Memphis, just 15 miles from where Cairo stands today. 5,000 years later, a megacity still occupies virtually the same ground. Egypt's ancient farmers understood the Nile's flood cycle so precisely that they developed one of the world's first agricultural calendars, 5,000 years ago. Their 3-season calendar based on the flood is still studied by scholars today. In 2560 BC, Pharaoh Khufu decided to build something that would last forever. He succeeded. The Great Pyramid contains 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing up to 15 tons, 5.9 million tons total. Built without iron tools, without wheels, without any machinery we would recognize today. 100,000 workers. 20 years. Modern engineers equipped with satellites, lasers, and computers attempted to reproduce the Great Pyramid's alignment with true north. They could not match it. The ancient builders with none of those tools achieved 99.9% accuracy, a margin of error of just 3/60ths of 1 degree. The builders were not slaves. They were skilled, paid laborers who received wages, medical care, and honorable burial. The myth of slave labor does not match the archaeological evidence. The pyramid was not simply a tomb. It was a launch mechanism. The Egyptians believed the pharaoh's soul needed to ascend to Orion's belt, and the pyramid's precise alignment would guide that journey. The entire structure was an astronomical instrument pointed at the sky. The Great Pyramid held the record as the tallest man-made structure on Earth for 3,800 years, from 2560 BC until 1311 AD, when Lincoln Cathedral in England was completed. No other structure in human history has held a world record for that length of time. The pyramids were not built to preserve the dead. They were built to launch the pharaoh's soul to a specific point among the stars. And the star map the ancient Egyptians used for that calculation contains astronomical knowledge that researchers are still working to fully decode. That knowledge would resurface at critical moments in Egyptian history for thousands of years afterward. In 332 BC, Alexander marched into Egypt with an army that had conquered half the known world. The Egyptians did not fight him, they welcomed him as a liberator. The priests declared him son of the god Ammonius, the legitimate pharaoh of Egypt. Alexander founded the city of Alexandria on the Egyptian coast, then left Egypt 8 months later and never returned. He died at 32 in Babylon, thousands of miles away. The city that became the intellectual capital of the ancient world was designed by a man who never saw it finished. Alexandria became extraordinary. Its library held 700,000 scrolls, the largest repository of human knowledge in the ancient world. Euclid developed geometry there. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth there in the 3rd century BC. Then the library burned. Irreplaceable knowledge gone forever. The most extraordinary ruler of the dynasty that followed Alexander was its last, Cleopatra VII. Not Egyptian but Macedonian Greek. The first ruler of her dynasty to learn the Egyptian language, speaking 9 languages in total. Ancient sources describe her as the most educated woman of her era. Cleopatra had herself smuggled past Julius Caesar's guards wrapped inside a carpet, so she could present herself to him in private. The scheme worked. Caesar was immediately captivated. The most consequential love affair of the ancient world began with what was essentially a delivery. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony. Octavian defeated them at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Cleopatra chose her own death over being paraded through Rome as a captive. She was 39. With her death, 3,000 years of pharaonic rule ended. Rome took everything. Rome transformed Egypt into the empire's breadbasket, shipping enough grain to feed 1 million Roman citizens every year for 4 centuries. And even after Rome fell, the city kept going. What came next would build Cairo into a global power Rome itself had never achieved. In 969 AD, Jawhar al-Sakili arrived from North Africa with a Fatimid army and conquered Egypt in 4 months. Then he built an entirely new city from scratch. He named it Al-Qahira, the victorious Cairo. Cairo was named after the planet Mars. In Arabic, Mars is Al-Qahir, the subduer. Jawhar's astronomers said Mars was at the height of its power on the day the city's foundation was laid. Cairo was born under the sign of the planet of war, and it has lived that way ever since. Jawhar built Al-Azhar Mosque alongside a school that grew into Al-Azhar University, the oldest continuously operating university in the world. Oxford, founded in 1096, opened more than a century after Al-Azhar had already been running. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, Cairo's scholars were translating Aristotle, Plato, and Euclid from Greek into Arabic, preserving classical knowledge that would eventually re-enter Europe and spark the Renaissance. Cairo kept the lights on for the entire civilized world. In 1171 AD, a Kurdish general took control of Egypt. The Europeans called him Saladin. He built the Cairo citadel on Mokattam Hill, a fortress that served as Egypt's seat of government for nearly 700 years. You can walk its battlements today. Saladin paid the ransoms of poor prisoners who could not afford their own freedom out of his personal treasury. His European enemies, men who came to the Holy Land specifically to fight him, described him as more generous and more noble than any Christian king they had ever encountered. In 1187 AD, Saladin recaptured Jerusalem. The Crusaders had massacred the city in 1099. Saladin guaranteed civilian safety, let Christians leave with their possessions, and freed prisoners too poor to pay ransoms. Richard the Lionheart fought Saladin for 2 years without ever meeting him. When Richard fell ill, Saladin sent him fresh fruit and horses. Medieval warfare conducted with a civility that feels almost impossible to imagine. The Cairo citadel that Saladin built still stands. But what happened inside those walls in the centuries after him? A massacre so calculated it eliminated an entire ruling class in a single afternoon, remains one of the most shocking events in Cairo's long history. In 1250 AD, the slaves overthrew the Sultan and ruled Egypt for 267 years. The Mamluks, military slaves trained from childhood, created one of the most powerful states in the medieval world. 10 years later they stopped the Mongols. In 1258 the Mongols destroyed Baghdad, burning every library, killing the caliph, seemingly unstoppable. Then in 1260 at the Battle of Ain Jalut, the Mamluk army defeated them in open battle for the first time in the conquest era. Cairo stopped the force that had already destroyed half the civilized world. Under Mamluk rule, Cairo became the wealthiest city on earth. Ibn Battuta, who had seen the courts of China, India, and Mali, called it the mother of all cities. Cairo's population reached 500,000 while London had just 40,000. Everything of value in the medieval world moved through this city. When the Black Death arrived in Cairo in 1348, the city was losing an estimated 7,000 people every single day at its peak. And yet Cairo rebuilt. Within a single generation the markets were full again. The city absorbed a catastrophe that destroyed entire civilizations elsewhere. In 1798, Napoleon sailed to Egypt with 54,000 soldiers and 167 scholars, scientists, artists, historians, archaeologists. He did not simply want to conquer Egypt. He wanted to understand it. Before Napoleon's expedition, Europeans knew almost nothing about ancient Egypt beyond what Greek and Roman authors had written. His scholar's 23-volume description de l'Egypte brought ancient Egypt to the Western world for the first time and invented the science of Egyptology. One military campaign created an entire academic discipline. Before battle, Napoleon told his troops, "Soldiers, from the tops of these pyramids 40 centuries look down upon you." The battle lasted 2 hours. His infantry shattered the Mamluk cavalry. 3 weeks later Nelson destroyed the French fleet. Napoleon slipped out in secret, abandoned his army and never returned. In 1799, a French soldier uncovered a stone slab near Rosetta inscribed with the same text in three scripts: Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphics. The Rosetta Stone cracked the code of Egyptian hieroglyphics after 1,400 years of silence, unlocking 3,000 years of ancient history. It currently sits in the British Museum. Egypt has been requesting its return ever since. In 1869, Egypt cut a canal through 100 miles of desert, connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, cutting the London to Bombay route from 12,000 miles to 7,200. Global trade redrawn overnight. The Suez Canal opening ceremony was so extravagant it bankrupted Egypt. That bankruptcy forced the government to sell its canal shares to Britain in 1875. Within 7 years, Britain used that financial foothold to militarily occupy Egypt. The party celebrating Egyptian achievement led directly to Egyptian colonization. British forces occupied Egypt in 1882 and controlled the country for 70 years. Cairo was the capital of a nation that nominally governed itself but answered to London. It was a situation that could not last. On July 23, 1952, at midnight, young Egyptian military officers seized the national radio station. Within hours they controlled Cairo. The Free Officers Movement overthrew King Farouk I, ending 150 years of dynastic rule without significant bloodshed. When Egypt's last king was searched at customs before leaving, officials found in his luggage a pornography collection, rare coins, and the personal cufflinks of King George VI of Britain, which Farouk had apparently stolen during a state visit to London. This was Egypt's last monarch, fleeing his own country with stolen British royal jewelry. Power consolidated around Gamal Abdel Nasser, who nationalized the Suez Canal on July 26, 1956. His 4.5-hour speech contained a buried military code word, the name Ferdinand de Lesseps. Every time Nasser said it, Egyptian military units received their signal. By the time the speech ended, Egypt had already secured the canal. Britain, France, and Israel launched a coordinated military attack on Egypt in response. The operation was going well, until President Eisenhower threatened Britain with economic sanctions and forced an immediate withdrawal. Britain backed down from a campaign it was winning. That humiliation marked the definitive end of Britain as a global imperial power. Cairo's defiance ended the British Empire. 1956 was the moment British global dominance ended. But it was not the end of Cairo's turbulent century. The city still had wars, defeats, and ultimately one of the most watched popular uprisings in modern history still ahead of it. Today Cairo is home to 25 million people, the 7th largest urban area on Earth, the largest in Africa, and the largest in the Arab world. To stand in Cairo is to exist in multiple layers of time simultaneously. Medieval Islamic architecture sits beside Ottoman mosques, 19th-century boulevards and 21st-century glass towers. Every era is visible, usually within a few hundred yards of something built 1,000 years apart. Cairo's road network was designed for 2 million vehicles. There are now 10 million registered vehicles in the city. Some districts have population densities exceeding 100,000 people per square kilometer, more intense than Manhattan, Hong Kong, or Mumbai. The infrastructure is carrying 5 times the load it was built for, and somehow the city functions. Perhaps no aspect of Cairo is more startling than the City of the Dead. Al-Kharafa is a medieval necropolis stretching 4 miles along the Muqaddam Hills. People began moving into its mausoleums over the centuries. First squatters, then migrants, then their children. Today, an estimated 500,000 to 1 million people live permanently inside it. They run electricity into burial chambers, raise families, and shop for groceries, all inside a functioning cemetery that is simultaneously a major heritage site. Tahrir Square was named Liberation Square in 1953 to mark the end of British colonialism. In January 2011, that name became literal. 2 million people filled the square and surrounding streets. After 18 days of sustained protest, President Mubarak, who had governed Egypt for 30 years, resigned. History recycled itself on exactly the same ground 58 years later. For 2 centuries, Egypt's greatest treasures were scattered in museums in London, Paris, Berlin, and New York. The Grand Egyptian Museum, opened between 2022 and 2023 at the foot of the Giza Plateau, is the largest archaeological museum in the world, nearly 5 million square feet, more than 100,000 artifacts, and for the first time in history, the complete treasures of Tutankhamun in a single location. Tutankhamun became pharaoh at 9 and died at 19. His successors erased his name from official records. History forgot him, which is precisely why his tomb survived undisturbed for 3,300 years until Howard Carter found it in 1922. The most famous pharaoh in the world is famous because history tried to erase him and failed. Cairo is suffocating under its own success. Egypt's response is characteristically ambitious, a brand new capital city from scratch in the desert. The new administrative capital, under construction since 2015, is designed for 6.5 million people across 700 square kilometers. At its center rises the iconic tower, 385 meters tall, the tallest building in Africa. The new administrative capital is being built with Chinese financing, and Africa's tallest building was constructed by a Chinese state company. The land of the pharaohs, which repelled the Mongols, outlasted the British Empire, and defied three nations simultaneously in 1956, is now building its future with Chinese capital. 5,000 years of history did not prepare anyone for that sentence. 3100 BC, Narmer unifies Egypt. The world's first nation-state. 2560 BC, Khufu builds a monument to eternity. It still stands. 332 BC, Alexander arrives. The Egyptians make him a god. 31 BC, Cleopatra dies. Rome takes everything. 969 AD, Cairo is born. Named after the planet Mars. 1187 AD, Saladin recaptures Jerusalem with a generosity his enemies could not comprehend. 1260 AD, the Mamluks stopped the Mongols. The world breathes. 1348 AD, the Black Death kills 7,000 a day. Cairo rebuilds. 1798 AD, Napoleon arrives looking for immortality. He finds knowledge. 1869 AD, the Suez Canal opens. Global trade redrawn overnight. 1952 AD, Revolution. The last king sails away. 1956 AD, Nasser defies three nations at once. An empire ends. 2011 AD, 2 million fill one square. A 30-year autocracy falls in 18 days. 2023 AD, the world's greatest archaeological museum opens at the foot of the pyramids. Every civilization that confronted Cairo eventually went away. The Persians left. The Greeks left. The Romans left. The Crusaders left. The Mongols never made it this far. The French left. The British left. Cairo is still here. The pyramids were ancient when Rome was founded. Ancient when Islam was born. Ancient when Europe discovered the Americas. They will be standing long after every city built in the last 500 years has been forgotten. This is Cairo. Messy, overcrowded, impossible, and extraordinary. And it has been that way for 5,000 years. Thank you for reading. Creating videos like this takes an enormous amount of research, time, and care. If you enjoyed this journey, please like and subscribe so you don't miss where we're going next. Let us know in the comments, which city would you like us to explore? Before we go, one more thing. Beneath the Sphinx, seismic surveys in the 1990s detected a series of underground chambers that have never been excavated, and that Egyptian authorities have not permitted researchers to open. A lost library? An undiscovered tomb? Nobody knows. After 5,000 years, Cairo is still keeping secrets. That story is our next video. Hit subscribe and we'll see you there.